to talk about a way forward for refugees. It's a huge issue right now politically and also just as a humanitarian issue. First, I just want to quickly talk about the scale of the problem, not give you a lot of numbers, but I think we just have to kind of define it. 65 million people displaced around the world. That's about the population of the UK. It's the largest number ever in recorded history, so more than after World War II. 20 million of those people, more than 20 million, are refugees, which means they've actually fled their country because of forced displacement. So it's because of war and persecution. That's why they left. About 40 million, or more than 40 million, are displaced for those same reasons, but haven't crossed an international border. So 65 million displaced. It's a huge number. Often, refugees are defined by what they've lost, which is a lot: their homes, their communities, their jobs, their friends, in many cases, family members. But I think it's also important to remember that it's a mistake just to think about refugees that way, because they're just people. So they also have a lot of things. They have hope. You wouldn't get up and leave your house, leave everything behind, and run if you didn't have hope for a better future. They also many times have education, particularly in some of the most recent crises like Syria. Business people, doctors, other professionals. Many are also laborers and farmers, so they have skills. They have a willingness to work. And they also have a great desire to live in peace. Nobody who flees conflict wants to go and live in more conflict. So these are all things that refugees actually bring to communities after they flee. Where are they from? 40% are from Syria. It's in the news. But I didn't want to just talk about Syria because so many are from other places. The big three countries are Afghanistan, Syria, and Somalia, but refugees are fleeing in all parts of the world. So Congo, Iraq, Burma, the northern triangle of Central America, which is Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, so that right in our backyard, from all over. And where are they now? Well, we all see in the news that there are over 1 million in Europe. But that's really what made us aware of the refugee crisis, but it's been going on for a much longer time. There are millions of refugees in other places that are hosted by much poorer parts of the world. Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Kenya, Ethiopia, Mexico. So refugees are everywhere, and this was kind of more of a hidden crisis or something that we didn't pay a lot of attention to until we saw refugees coming into Europe, and all of a sudden, everyone said this is a crisis. So keep that in mind. By the way, these are some pictures that are taken by some of my colleagues at HIAS, some of the refugees that we serve around the world. So what's next for refugees? Well, there are 3 things that typically happen for refugees. They're called the durable solutions, and this is an international legal term. But they're very basic, and they make sense. What are the 3 durable solutions? One is return, voluntary return. They go home. Well, that's not really an option for most refugees anymore. The scale of the crisis is so huge, and the violence is so pervasive, that it's very difficult for people to go home because there's just no place safe. So just to give you an example, last year, 200,000 refugees went home. That's out of 20 million displaced. So it's not very likely that refugees are going to go home. The second durable solution is local integration, which means they fled to a country, they're living there, and then eventually they will make that their home. That also has become very difficult because the scale is so large that the countries that are hosting refugees, who have been very generous, countries like Jordan, Lebanon, Ethiopia, Kenya, they have struggles themselves. These are not wealthy countries necessarily. There's limited opportunities in the workforce. It's difficult to educate all these children. Medical care is scarce. So these countries are really, although they've been very welcoming and remain welcoming, are really struggling, and they need our help. So the UN Refugee Agency, which supports these countries, is actually only 40% funded to provide support to refugees. And that's the average. It's actually higher for Syrian refugees because that's kind of the crisis that's in the news, but lower for African refugees, as little as 20% funded. So there's just not enough international support for these countries that are doing so much. And the third thing is resettlement. So resettlement is basically when third countries that can afford to do it, like the US, we're the largest, but also Australia, Canada, the Nordic countries, countries in Europe, actually go out and, for political reasons, for foreign policy reasons, and for humanitarian reasons, identify refugees to bring to our countries to integrate and to support, and so they can start their lives. Now, that's a great option. But the numbers are tiny, really. The last year, calendar year 2015, about 100,000 people were able to get resettlement. It's a much larger number now. The international community has been paying more attention to it, but it's only about, I think, 300,000. And the US is the largest. We actually resettled 85,000 last fiscal year and are going to be resettling 110,000. Of the 85,000 that we resettled, 12,000 were Syrians. So we resettle refugees from all over the world. We are the world's leader in refugee resettlement. But what happens when these three durable solutions are not really an option? I mean, like we just said, nobody's going home, there's not enough resources in host communities for local integration, and resettlement is very limited. Well, people move. I mean, what would you do? You know, you have hope, you've left already, your kids aren't in school, you can't find work. What would you do? You would move, people move. So the problem is, it looks and feels like chaos because there's no system, people are just taking off and moving because there's no real good way for it to happen in any other way. So it looks and feels like chaos. And people take huge risks, and you all have seen that in the news. People die in the Mediterranean, people die crossing our southern border. So we don't want that. We don't think that people should be dying because they're doing what all of us would do in their situation, which is to move for a better life, a safer life. So, the way forward. World peace would be good. I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to skip that. But that would be the solution. Development, all kinds there's so many things that need to be done. But I can't get into that. Second thing is helping host countries. These countries have been very generous, and let's be realistic. Resettlement is not going to be an option for everybody in the near future, and peace on earth so that everybody can go home is probably not going to happen anywhere near term. So how do we support these countries, and how do we kind of share the responsibility? That's the big theme this year with refugees. How do we do that? Part of it is by actually providing more funds to these host countries to make sure that they can provide these services. A lot of refugees don't want to necessarily be resettled. They want to stay close to home so that if the opportunity comes, they can go back, or they have family members who are still there. If you think about it, if you had a child who was, in your country and you were next door, you might not want to go to the US. You would want to kind of hope to be reunited quickly. So some people don't want to leave, but there's not enough money. And again, the US is the largest supporter of refugees. So the president asked for $6 billion in the FY17 budget, but that's what we spent on Halloween, $6 billion. So, we could be doing more there. And the rest of the world also needs to do more. And then the other thing is increasing resettlement. It is a big number, 110,000, but given the scale of the crisis, we can and should be doing more. We are a country that's always welcomed immigrants and refugees. We have the capacity to do it. The way we do it now is a public-private partnership where organizations such as HIAS, the one I work for, but also other faith-based organizations and humanitarian organizations partner with local communities on the ground to receive and welcome refugees. So we have an infinite capacity for that. There's so much support for that in the communities despite the political rhetoric. We need to be doing more resettlement. And then what we need is really a global movement for refugees. We have a global movement of refugees, but we need a global movement for refugees. Governments should do more, but they're not going to do more unless we demand it. And we're up against some really kind of big challenges, which is fear of change, fear of newcomers. These are powerful things, but when you think about it, what are the risks of not doing this? Let's not think about the risks of doing this, but what are the risks of not doing this? It's this chaos. It's this people really exposing themselves to really dangerous situations. And we can't live in a world like that where thousands of people are dying just trying to find safety. So more concretely, I wish I could tell you some stories so you see some pictures. One thing you can do, I'm sure there have been TED Talks by refugees. Watch them, meet them. More refugees are being resettled in this country. Get their stories. It's really important. It's amazing what they will tell you. And it's amazing when you see how similar they are in their circumstances, what their lives were like before they left. They were like ours. The other thing is tell your governors. Many governors have come out against refugee resettlement, and your members of Congress that you would like to support refugees. They're not hearing from us because, quite honestly, we're not as energized as those who really want to stop providing this kind of assistance. Support your local resettlement agency. You can go online. All of this you can find out online. Just your local resettlement agency by volunteering, donating supplies, donating your time would be great. And keep in mind that nobody expects to be a refugee. Again, doctors, business people just like us. The only power they have is to get up and move, but they don't have any power over policy. But we do, because we're here and we're safe. So we really should use this opportunity to make our voices heard and do more to protect refugees. We can make a difference. So that is the way forward that I recommend, and thank you all very much.